What if the most hated man in human history was not a traitor? What if Judas Iscariot, the man whose name is synonymous with betrayal, the ultimate villain of the Christian story, was, in fact, the only one who truly understood the mission? What if the institutional Roman Church, the same church that banned the Book of Enoch and the Gnostic Gospels, deliberately demonized Judas to hide a secret so profound it would shatter their entire foundation of sin and salvation? What if a forbidden gospel, lost for 1,700 years, buried in the Egyptian desert, was found? A gospel written not by Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, but by Judas himself? And what if that gospel reveals that Jesus gave Judas a secret command to perform the very act of betrayal that would change the world? This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is the story of the Gospel of Judas. For 2 millennia, the story has been simple. Judas was greedy. He was a thief. For 30 pieces of silver, he betrayed the Son of God with a kiss. His guilt was so immense that he hung himself. It is a clean story, a simple story, a story of good versus evil. But have you ever felt the plot holes in that story? Why would Jesus, who could read the hearts of men, choose a man he knew would betray him, and then make that man his treasurer? Why would the Gospel of John state that Jesus knew Judas was the traitor, yet wash his feet at the Last Supper? Why would the betrayal be necessary at all, when Jesus was a public figure, preaching daily in the temple? The authorities didn't need Judas to identify him. And why, as we will see, does the Bible itself offer 2 completely different, contradictory stories about how Judas died? If you have ever felt that the official narrative of Judas doesn't add up, you were right. You were sensing the scar tissue of a story that had been deliberately altered. The institutional church needed a villain. They needed a traitor. They needed a fall guy to create their simple narrative of sin, Judas, and sacrifice, Jesus. But the Gnostics, the early Christian mystics, told a different story. A story so dangerous, the early church father Irenaeus, in 180 AD, wrote an entire book attacking it, specifically naming and condemning the Gospel of Judas. The church knew this other gospel existed, and they tried to destroy every copy. They failed. In the 1,970 seconds in the sands of Egypt, this impossible text was found, a tattered papyrus codex written in ancient Coptic. It passed through the black market for decades, a secret whispered among collectors. Finally, it was acquired, preserved, and translated by National Geographic in 2006. The world was finally allowed to read the book that Irenaeus had tried to burn, and its contents are the most shocking revelation in Christian history. It is a text that claims to be the private, secret, the conversation between Jesus and Judas Iscariot in the 3 days leading up to the Passover. It begins not with a story, but with a scene of profound separation. Jesus finds his 12 disciples, and he laughs at them. The disciples, confused, ask, "Master, why are you laughing at us?" Jesus replies, "I am not laughing at you. I am laughing because you are not praying to my God. You are praying to the lesser God, the God of this world." In one sentence, the Gnostic framework is laid bare. This is the same secret we uncovered in our 2 gods investigation. The disciples, Peter, James, John, were still asleep. They were still, in their ignorance, worshiping the Demiurge, the jealous God of the Old Testament. They looked at Jesus, the man, and they believed he was that God. They had missed the entire point. But the text says that one man, Judas, understood. Judas steps forward and says, "I know who you are, and from what realm you have come. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you." In that moment, Jesus realizes that Judas, and only Judas, has the Gnosis. Judas knows that Jesus is not the God of this world, but a messenger from the true Father, the realm of pure light. Jesus, seeing this, separates Judas from the others. He says, "Step away from the others, and I will tell you the mysteries of the kingdom." He continues, "It is possible for you to reach it, but you will grieve much." This is the secret teaching. Jesus explains the Gnostic cosmology. He explains the true Father, the abyss, the pleroma. He explains the fall of Sophia, and he explains the creation of the Demiurge, the lesser god who rules this physical world. And then he gives Judas the real mission, the secret command. Jesus explains that he, the divine Christ, the spark of light, is trapped in the physical body of Jesus the man. This body, like all physical matter, is a creation of the Demiurge. It is a prison. In order for the divine Christ to be liberated and return to the realm of light, this physical garment must be destroyed. The other disciples, in their ignorance, were trying to build an earthly kingdom, a kingdom of the Demiurge. They were trying to prevent his death. Jesus needed one disciple, the only one who understood, to help him escape. He looks at Judas and delivers the most shocking command in history. "But you, Judas, you will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." This is the secret. The betrayal was not a betrayal. It was a mission. It was an act of liberation. Jesus was ordering Judas to hand his physical body over to the authorities of the Demiurge, so that his spirit could be set free. Judas was not the traitor. He was the liberator. He was not the greatest sinner. He was the most obedient and enlightened apostle. This is the secret that the Roman Church had to bury. Because if this is true, then the entire story of sin and salvation that they were building is a lie. The Gospel of Judas begins with the most shocking act of separation in the Gospels. Jesus laughs at his chosen disciples. This is not a laugh of joy. It is a laugh of profound, almost tragic pity. The text says the disciples were gathered, offering a prayer of thanksgiving over the bread. They were performing what we would now call the Eucharist. They look up at Jesus, expecting his blessing. Instead, he laughs. Peter, James, and the others are confused, and then they become angry. They say, "Master, why are you laughing at our prayer? Have we done something wrong?" Jesus looks at them and delivers the line that rips the veil from the Gnostic truth. He says, "I am not laughing at you. I am laughing because you are not doing this in my name. You are doing this in the name of your God." The disciples are stunned. They reply, "Master, you are our God." And Jesus, in a moment of devastating clarity, looks at his chosen, beloved friends and says, "How do you know me? Truly I say to you, no generation of the people who are among you will know me." In this one breathtaking exchange, the entire Gnostic framework is laid bare. The 11 disciples, the men who would found the institutional church, were asleep. They were pious, they were devout, they were loyal, but they were ignorant. Who was this God they were worshiping? They were devout Jews. They were worshiping the God they had always known, the God of the Old Testament, the God of Genesis, the God who gave the law on Mount Sinai, the God named Yahweh. But as we uncovered in our previous investigations, the Gnostics knew a terrifying secret. They knew that the God of the Old Testament was not the true, ultimate Father. He was the lesser God. He was the Demiurge. He was the jailer of this physical, material world. A flawed, arrogant, and ignorant creator God who, in Genesis, boasted, "I am a jealous God. You shall have no other gods before me." The disciples, in their piety, were prisoners, praying to their own jailer. This is why Jesus laughed. They had missed the entire point of his mission. But then, Judas steps forward. Judas, the man history calls the traitor, is the only one who gets it. he says to Jesus. "I know who you are, and from what realm you have come. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you." In that moment, the entire narrative flips. Judas is the only one in the room who knows. He has the Gnosis. He knows that Jesus is not the Demiurge, not the God the others are worshiping. He knows Jesus is a messenger, an emanation from the true Father, the realm of pure, unconditional love and light. Jesus, seeing this, pulls Judas aside. "This is the great separation," he says to Judas. "Step away from the others, and I will tell you the mysteries of the kingdom." The rest of the Gospel of Judas, 1, is this secret teaching. It is the Gnostic cosmology that the institutional church had to destroy. Jesus explains the real structure of the universe, the truth that was hidden from us by the God of this world. He explains that above all there is the monad, the true Father, the abyss of light. He is perfect, and he does not create, he emanates. He explains that from this true Father, a series of divine aeons, or principles, came forth. One of these aeons was the divine feminine, Sophia, or wisdom. Sophia, in a fall of passion, desired to create on her own, without her divine partner. Her creation was a mistake, an abortion, a flawed, arrogant being, born in the darkness outside the true realm of light. This being was Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge. Jesus explains to Judas that this Demiurge, this lesser god, then stole power from his mother, Sophia, and created the physical, material world in our universe as his own flawed kingdom. He created this world as a prison. He created the archons, or rulers, the angels of the Old Testament, to guard this prison. And then, as we learned in our Eden secret investigation, he trapped the divine spark of Sophia inside his new creation, Adam. He created humanity as his slaves. This is the mystery Jesus reveals to Judas. He tells Judas, "Look, I will teach you about the star that wanders." He is explaining the system of the archons, the rulers of this world, the powers and principalities that Paul speaks of. He explains that the 11 other disciples are worshiping the archon, the jailer, the demiurge. And then Jesus reveals why Judas is special. He says, "Judas, you are from the great generation. You are not from the generation of these rulers." Judas's soul, his spark, is pure. He is the only one who has the Gnosis to understand the truth. And now that Judas knows the true nature of the cosmos, now that he knows that Jesus is a messenger from the true God, and that the physical world is a prison, he is finally ready to receive his mission. A mission that the other 11, in their ignorance, would see as the ultimate betrayal. A mission that was, in fact, the ultimate liberation. Once we understand the Gnostic framework that Judas was the hero on a secret mission from Christ, the clues of the betrayal suddenly snap into focus. The acts that the institutional church has taught us to see as evil are revealed as Gnostic rituals. Let's start with the 30 pieces of silver. The official story claims this was an act of petty greed. This is the cornerstone of his demonization. But this makes no sense. Why would Judas, a man who had walked with Christ for years, betray the Son of God for the price of a common slave? And why, according to the Gospel of Matthew, did he immediately regret it and throw the money back at the priests? The greed motive is weak. It's illogical. The Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Philip, provide a different answer. To the Gnostics, this world is a prison ruled by the Demiurge. The currency of this prison is money. The 30 pieces of silver were not a bribe. They were a transaction. In order to liberate the divine, Christ, the Spirit, from the man that clothes him, the flesh, Judas had to perform a cosmic, ritualistic purchase. He had to buy the physical body of Jesus from the powers of this world. using the currency of this world. He was, in effect, paying the exit fee to the archons, the servants of the Demiurge. This is why, as soon as the transaction was complete, the money was unclean. It had served its ritual purpose. Judas, the Gnostic priest, threw the blood money back into the temple, the house of the Demiurge. His part of the ritual was done. Now, let's look at the kiss. The institutional church calls this the traitor's kiss, the ultimate symbol of deceit. But again, it makes no sense. Jesus was not in hiding. He was a famous public figure. The temple guards, who had seen him preach, did not need Judas to point him out. This part of the story is illogical. Unless the kiss was not for the guards, the kiss was for Jesus. In the Gnostic Gospels, the kiss is the single highest, most sacred ritual. The Gospel of Philip, another text from Nag Hammadi, states that Jesus used to kiss Mary Magdalene, and the other disciples were jealous. The Gnostics knew the kiss was not romantic. It was the symbolic act of a master breathing or transferring his Gnosis, his secret knowledge, into his most beloved student. It was the passing of the torch. The kiss of Judas was not an act of betrayal. It was the final initiation. It was Judas, the only one who understood, approaching his master and saying, "I understand the mission. I am ready." And it was Jesus, the master, giving Judas the final transfer of Gnosis, the final blessing, the final thank you, before the great sacrifice could begin. This is the Gnostic truth. The betrayal was not a betrayal at all. It was a sacred, pre-arranged Gnostic ritual between a master who needed to be liberated and the only disciple brave enough, loving enough, and enlightened enough to do the one thing that had to be done. If the Gospel of Judas tells this heroic, liberating story, why have we been taught the exact opposite? Why is Judas Iscariot the most despised name in the world? Because he had to be. The institutional Roman Church needed Judas to be the villain. His demonization was not a mistake. It was a necessity. It was the most important cover-up in the history of the faith. The smoking gun that proves this cover-up comes from the pen of our old enemy, the man who, as we've discussed, led the war against the Gnostics, the Roman bishop Irenaeus. Around the year 180 AD, long before the Council of Nicaea, Irenaeus wrote his infamous hit list, a book called Against Heresies. In this book, Irenaeus specifically names and attacks the Gospel of Judas. This is the proof. The early church knew this gospel existed, and they hated it. Irenaeus mocks it. He calls it a fictitious history, an abomination. He confirms that the Gnostics, whom he calls heretics, revere Judas as a hero. And then he orders their texts to be destroyed. Now, we must ask the golden formula question. What was the motive? Why was Irenaeus so terrified of this one book? Because the Roman church he was building was based on a simple, controllable business model. A model that requires three things: original sin. Humanity is guilty, Adam and Eve. Blood sacrifice. Jesus, the only Son of God, had to die as a payment for that guilt. Church authority. The church, led by the other disciples like Peter, is the only gatekeeper that can give you that salvation. The Gospel of Judas destroys all three pillars of that model. First, it says sin is just ignorance. Second, it says Jesus' death was not a payment for sin. It was a liberation of the Spirit. Third, it says the other disciples, like Peter, were ignorant fools, and that Judas was the only one who understood the Gnosis. This was a declaration of war. If the Gnostic story was true, the entire Roman Church was a fraud. If Judas was the hero, then Peter, the rock of Rome, was a fool. If Jesus ordered his own sacrifice, then the Church's story of original sin was a lie, and the Church had no power, no control over anyone. It was uncontrollable. Irenaeus and the institutional church had no choice. They had to rewrite the story. They had to turn the hero into the traitor. They had to turn the apostle of Gnosis into the greedy demon. They had to demonize Judas to save their own institution. And for 1,700 years, their version of the story was the only one we were allowed to read. I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this investigation from? It is incredible to see this forbidden knowledge, this Gnosis, reaching awakened souls across the entire globe. Are you in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, in South America, or Australia? Let me know your country or city in the comments below. Let's see how truly global this community of knowers has become. The final proof of Judas's guilt, according to the church, is his death. The story is that his sin was so great, his guilt so overwhelming, that he could not live with himself, and he hanged himself. This act seals the narrative. Judas, the traitor, is punished and goes to hell. But just like the betrayal itself, the official story of Judas's death is full of plot holes. The Bible itself cannot agree on how Judas died. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, says, "He went away and hanged himself," a simple, clean suicide. But the book of Acts, chapter 1, tells a completely different and far more gruesome story. Peter says, "Falling headlong, his body burst open in the middle, and all his intestines gushed out." These two stories cannot both be true. One is a quiet suicide. The other is a horrific, explosive death. The infallible Word of God has a massive contradiction. This is the first clue that the story has been tampered with. The early authors were scrambling to create a punishment that fit the crime they had invented. But the Gnostic Gospels offer a third and far more profound explanation. An explanation that has nothing to do with guilt. Let's return to the Gnostic mission. Jesus' secret command was, "You will sacrifice the man that clothes me." The mission was to liberate the divine spirit from the physical, material body. Jesus, the Master, had shown the way. His spirit was liberated from his own body through the crucifixion. Judas, the best disciple, the only one who understood Gnosis, had completed the first half of his mission. He had liberated his master. But Judas himself was still trapped in a physical body. He was still trapped in the prison of the Demiurge. The official story says he died of guilt. The Gnostic story suggests he died of completion. To the Gnostics, the ultimate goal was to escape the material world, to shed the garment of flesh and ascend back to the pleroma, the realm of light. Judas's death, whether by hanging or by a spiritual explosion of energy, his body bursting open, was not an act of guilt. It was the final act of Gnosis. It was the final act of liberation. He had successfully liberated his master, and now, his mission complete, he liberated himself. He was the first true Gnostic, the first to follow Jesus' real teaching all the way to the end. He shed his fleshly prison to follow the Spirit of Christ back to the true Father. This is the secret. The institutional church needed Judas to be a guilty suicide, damned to hell. The Gnostics knew him as the great martyr, the first to achieve ascension after Christ. His death was not a punishment for sin. It was a graduation from the material world. The cover-up of Judas was not an isolated event. It was the first pillar to fall in a systematic campaign of total information control. The early Roman Church, in its quest for absolute authority, had to destroy anyone who claimed to have Gnosis, that direct personal knowledge of the divine. They had to create a gatekeeper system, where they were the only ones who held the keys to salvation. To do this, they had to destroy the reputations of the two people, the two apostles, who, according to the Gnostic Gospels, had understood Jesus' secret teachings better than anyone. The first, as we have seen, was Judas Iscariot. The Gnostic Gospels, like the one that bears his name, paint him as the enlightened male apostle, the one who understood the two gods and the true mission of liberation. So, the institutional church, led by Irenaeus, had to turn him into the traitor. They had to make him a greedy demon. They destroyed the enlightened male. But there was another disciple who understood the Gnosis, a disciple who, according to the Gnostic texts, was also given the secret teachings. The apostle to the apostles, Mary Magdalene. The church was building a patriarchal power structure, a boys' club of bishops and priests. They had two enemies, Gnosis, inner knowledge, and the divine feminine. Judas represented the first threat. Mary Magdalene represented both. And so, the institutional church performed a dual cover-up, a two-front war on the truth. Judas, the apostle of Gnosis, was turned into the traitor. Mary, the apostle of Sophia, was turned into the harlot. It was the same strategy. It was the same motive. They took the two disciples who were closest to Christ's real Gnostic message, and they assassinated their characters. They turned the two greatest apostles into the two greatest sinners. Why? Because, as we saw in the Gospel of Mary, Peter, the rock of Rome, was jealous of Mary. The text says he confronted her, shouting, "Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? Did he prefer her to us?" The Gnostic texts show a clear rivalry. It was Peter representing faith and institution, versus Mary and Judas representing Gnosis and liberation. The Roman Church chose Peter's side. They chose the institution. To do that, they had to destroy the reputation of everyone who challenged Peter's authority. They silenced the enlightened male, Judas, by making him a demon, and they silenced the enlightened female, Mary, by making her a prostitute. They erased the divine feminine, Sophia, and created an all-male trinity. This was the great cover-up. They hid the true Father of love and replaced him with the Demiurge of fear. They hid the liberator Christ and replaced him with a king who supported their empires. They hid the hero serpent and replaced him with the devil. They hid the apostle Mary and replaced her with the harlot. And they hid the apostle Judas and replaced him with the traitor. They created a perfect prison for the mind, where sin was the disease and they were the only cure. They buried the truth, that ignorance is the prison, and Gnosis is the key. The cover-up was almost perfect. By the 5th century, the institutional Roman Church had won the war. They had their new, unified, controllable religion. The Book of Enoch, with its messy story of the Watchers, was banned and buried. The Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Mary, Philip, and Judas, were declared heresy and burned. The apostle of Gnosis, Judas, was turned into a demon. The apostle of Sophia, Mary, was turned into a prostitute. The liberator was turned into the devil. They thought they had erased the truth, but they failed. They could burn the books, but they could not erase the echoes of Gnosticism that were already hidden in their own approved Gospels. The truth was hidden in plain sight. Let's look at the Gospel of John. Of the 4 canonical Gospels, John is the latest, the most mystical, and the most Gnostic. It begins not with a birth in a manger, but with a cosmic statement. In the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Logos and Word are core Gnostic concepts representing the mind of the true Father. Then, John gives us the Gnostic plot. John, chapter 1, verse 10. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. This is the Gnostic truth in one sentence. The God who made this world, the Demiurge, was ignorant. He did not know the true Logos, the true Christ, when he came. John's Gospel is the story of a being of light, the true God, descending into a world of darkness, the Demiurge's prison. And what about Jesus' own words? The Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, found at Nag Hammadi, is a collection of 114 secret sayings. Many scholars believe it is older than the canonical Gospels, and its message is pure, uncut Gnosis. Jesus says, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." This is the dangerous teaching of Mary Magdalene. It is a direct attack on the institutional church, which says the kingdom is only found through them. Jesus says in Thomas, "Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift a stone, and you will find me." This is Gnosticism. God is in everything. God is not trapped in a stone building in Rome. But perhaps the greatest Gnostic echo of all is the parable of the pearl, found in the Acts of Thomas. It is the entire Gnostic story, hidden in a single parable. The story is this: a young prince, the soul, the spark of Sophia, is sent by his father, the king, the true God, from the realm of light, down into the land of Egypt, the material world, the Demiurge's prison. His mission? To find a single lost pearl, Gnosis knowledge. This pearl is guarded by a terrible loud-breathing serpent, the Demiurge. When the prince arrives in Egypt, he forgets who he is. He becomes drunk on the world's ignorance. The king, the true father, must send a messenger, Christ, to awaken the prince. The prince remembers his mission. He uses Gnosis to put the serpent, the Demiurge, to sleep. He steals back the pearl, his own soul's Gnosis, sheds his dirty, material garment, his body, and ascends back to the realm of light. This is the mission of Christ. This is the mission of Judas. This is the mission of Mary Magdalene. The institutional church knew these stories. They couldn't erase them all, so they did the next best thing. They reinterpreted them. They took this Gnostic framework, and they inverted it. They took the serpent, the Gnostic hero, and told you he was the devil. They took Gnosis, the goal, and told you it was sin. And they took the Demiurge, the jailer, and told you he was the Father. This was the final cover-up. The truth was never fully erased. It was just hidden, right in front of you. The same imbalance that silenced Mary Magdalene and exiled Sophia is still at war within the modern soul. We have been taught to trust outer authority, our politicians, our media, our institutions, and to distrust our inner voice, our own intuition. We have been taught to live in fear of a jealous God, a judging God. We have been taught to see ourselves as sinners, born flawed, small, and weak. This is the software of the Demiurge. It is the program of control. The story of the Gnostics, the story of the two gods, is not just ancient history. It is a map. It is a mirror. It is the map for our own healing. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi texts in 1945, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, the discovery and translation of the Gospel of Judas in 2006. These were not accidents. This is the Great Awakening. This is the increase of knowledge prophesied for the end of days. The forbidden knowledge is returning. Sophia is rising again. The Gnosis that Jesus taught is this: you are not a flawed, sinful creature, born to obey a king. You are a divine, eternal spark, a fragment of the true God, temporarily trapped in a material world. Your true home is the realm of light. Your true nature is not sin, but ignorance of your own divinity, and your salvation is not found by kneeling to an outer authority. It is found by remembering who you truly are. This is why the Gnostic texts are so dangerous to the status quo, because an awakened humanity cannot be controlled. A person who has found the kingdom of God within no longer fears the judgment of the God without. A person who is connected with the Christ consciousness inside no longer needs a priest to mediate for them. A person who has balanced the masculine logic, with the feminine, intuition, the inner Sophia, becomes whole. This is the choice that stands before you. You can continue to believe the official story, the story that was edited, censored, and approved by Irenaeus and the Council of Nicaea. The story that needs you to be small, sinful, and afraid. Or you can choose to listen to that other voice, the one the Gnostics heard, the whisper of Sophia, the voice of the serpent in the garden, telling you your eyes will be opened and you will be as gods. The voice of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, saying, "The kingdom is inside you." The voice of Jesus in the Gospel of Judas, saying, "You will sacrifice the man that clothes me and liberate the spirit within." The silence of the Gnostics ends when one soul dares to listen. If you have felt this contradiction your entire life, if this message is not new information, but something your soul is remembering, then this is your awakening. The truth was never written on parchment. It was written in consciousness. It was written in you. If you are ready to continue this Gnostic investigation and uncover the other secrets the gatekeepers tried to bury, join this revolution of the mind. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Don't miss the next video. We will continue this investigation, uncovering the full, forbidden story of the other apostle they tried to silence, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gnosis of the divine feminine that Peter and the Roman Church tried to erase. I'll see you in the next investigation.